Wow, what a season! Interestingly enough, this episode missed out so much and left so many unanswered questions, from the new invaders to even Jinwoo adding the queen to his army. I want to keep this intro short, so let's dive right in. Based on how this episode began, right off the heels of Jinwoo finding the answer needed to heal Hunter Cha and the length of this episode, I think they were intended for both episodes to be aired back to back, the final two that is. But for some reason or another, they weren't. Which is fine because hey, that's more content, right? Jinwoo asks for the cameras to be shut off as now he's found the answer to healing Hunter Cha. But he doesn't want anyone outside the dungeon to see. I mean, it's kind of a crazy power, isn't it? And it would open up a lot of questions. Now I also saw some information where they said that the Korean version of this episode had the captions "use my power" at the end where we saw the blank screen, which justifies Jinwoo's actions. In the manhwa, Jinwoo would be searching for answers to bring Cha back and regretting taking so long to handle the Ant King. At first he considers shadow exchange, but he just used it, so the timer is still going. And he's never used it to travel with someone else before, so that wouldn't be an option. He also thought of using Kaisel, but then Cha would have died long before he got anywhere close to help. And then he considered if there were any S-rank healers from Japan's guild who had survived. But none of those would be an option, and then the idea would have spawned to him. At which point, he told the cameraman to turn off the cameras and asks his shadows to locate Min's body. In which case, one of his orcs would bring over the body instead of Tusk, which we saw in the anime. Jinwoo had much more of a difficult time bringing Min back. The first shadow extraction failed, so he thinks that Min is resisting, much like Igris had, all the while showing iron as a statement that iron is brainless. So he really didn't have an issue returning from the grave. So Jinwoo tries again, only to get Beck shouting, asking him what he's planning to do and what his ability is, only to see Min rise again as a shadow from the grave. And this is where he and the others figure out what Jinwoo's ability is. Min, without being ordered, heals Cha immediately. This is where Beck would approach Jinwoo, who says that Min must have been kind in his life as he healed Cha without being ordered. But Beck says that that's not Min anymore and asks that Jinwoo doesn't bring the new shadow into battle. In which case, Jinwoo was appreciative of Beck asking him for a favor rather than ordering him around, so he releases Min, who gives one last smile to Beck, a really touching moment. Things play out a bit differently in the anime as they gave us a glimpse outside to the surviving Japanese S-rank hunters, and the one that was in shock is still in shock even after getting off the island, just at the mere thought of the Ant King. But when he's told that the Ant King was killed by a Korean hunter, he's shocked just like the others. Of course, in the manhwa we get this scene only after Beck and the others had left the nest and the island altogether. Right before that though, the anime would give us President Matsumoto breaking down after finding out that the Korean hunters had survived and the sheer shit show that is unfolding. The devastating blow to their power as many of their hunters died due to the Ant King. So he concedes defeat and issues a final order to retreat. Of course, he wasn't shown again in the manhwa after way back when Goto died. The ants then start swarming. Without a clear leader, they just do whatever, and the boats directly on the outskirts of the island, housing other hunters, is the perfect attack zone. Normally they would go all out, one unified force attacking, but without a clear leader, they just do whatever. Some attack, and some just flee to other islands. The manhwa actually has this scene combined with the scene of Hunter Sung and Ju-hee protecting the coast before they were saved by Beru, because these two scenes appeared after Jinwoo added him to his army. At any rate, the hunters shoot their best magical spells to maul down the swarm, and there is a lot of them, so naturally they don't get them all in one fell swoop. And we get to see some familiar faces. Park slaughtering the ants as his cheerleader cheers him on, Captain Ki-hoon and his strike force from the Pussycat Guild going all out, and Lee Min-sung cowering in fear. The part about Lee wasn't included in the anime. Instead, we skipped over that and went back to Beck and the others gathering on their escape helicopter, as they still need to get Cha to a medical facility even though her life isn't in mortal danger anymore. But when one of the mages asks if Jinwoo isn't coming, he gets told that he's staying behind to clear out the rest of those guys. In the manhwa, things play out a little bit differently, as I can see why the anime changed this particular part. You see, Jinwoo escorted them outside and then he lets them know that he still has some things to do. As you know, he has a few shadows he wants to get added, and there's so many experience points left on the table. So he gets on Kaisel and flies back inside. And you can see the problem here. The main question is, why would he fly back inside and then fly out again? Why would he escort them when he could easily send shadows or use his sense to see where the powerful ants are? But the major threats have been dealt with, so no need for him to take action himself at all, even if he had a feeling that things were a bit off or leaving them to their own devices. This is when the manhwa would give us the scene of the traumatized Japanese hunter, and then we go back into the nest where Jinwoo is wiping out the rest of these guys, which does include these eggs. Now he's a bit surprised that these eggs are giving him experience as they're unhatched ones, but in the manhwa space there's no indication of him leveling up after taking these out. Something interesting that I found in the anime that might have been a bit of an overshot was Jinwoo's levels. You see, after leaving the demon castle, he was supposed to be level 97 and gaining 2 levels from killing the Ant King, and then another 1 level from the rest of experience gained, which would get him to level 100. But in the anime, working backwards here, he gained about 5 or 6 levels at this point in the dungeon, which means that he would have been level 94 or 95 after he left the demon dungeon. And I know it really doesn't change the story at all for the anime only, as his levels really haven't played a major part in the anime at all, and I really haven't broken down his levels and his stats and what everything does. Maybe I'll do a video about that in the coming months, I don't know. But I found it really interesting here. Probably I'm nitpicking. Jinwoo pulls up his inventory and says that he needs to organize before pulling out the Demon Monarch's sword, which we covered a few videos ago. But since the anime didn't really highlight it, it would be natural that viewers would be like, wait a minute, when did he get that? He swings this blade to cut down several ants at a time with the lightning storm and is impressed by the ability while lamenting that he's not using the blade as much as he should. After mauling down these scrubs, he finally hits level 100. But before that, the manhwa would interject with a scene which I'll leave out, and there are a few like this within the episode, but they feel a little spoilery to me. But what you should know though is that Jinwoo's victory over the dungeon wasn't just broadcast in Korea, it was broadcast across the world, and he's caught the attention of a few countries. But back to the scene where Jinwoo's shadows take out the rest of the nest. This was an anime exclusive. Now, I really love this small bit here. As soon as Jinwoo hit level 100, we get a flash of something on our screens before moving right along to him reviving the Ant King. And I just had to slow this down frame by frame to see it. And it seems that he got some kind of key acquired from this dungeon or hitting level 100. And it seems his key is to the Cartinian temple. Anime onlys wouldn't know what this means, but for those of us who read the manhwa, this is something amazing, and it'll probably happen in season 3 or 4, I don't know. But for now, if I tell you, it'll be a spoiler, so I'll just leave that out, but I'm super happy to see it. This and a couple other scenes have hinted that the story will continue to season 3. Hopefully. The shadow extraction and talk with Beru went pretty much the same as you see in the anime, except after him, Jinwoo would extract the queen, and a little more information on the king here. Since he became Jinwoo's shadow, he's lost his gluttony ability, so he won't grow stronger from consuming other beings, because he's dead after all. But he does get stronger based on the experience which he gains after defeating enemies. And he's much stronger than S rank when he's revived. He also gets a sort of reset where all the abilities which he had up to now are now gone. This is why the anime took the liberty of showing us him being born again as if coming from the egg for the first time. This particular scene wasn't in the manhwa. Also, in the manhwa, the Ant King's name is a bit more thought-worthy than Jinwoo normally does. The name Beru comes from the French novelist Bernard Werber, who authored a famous book in 1991 called Empire of Ants, and then onward to the queen, who is also reborn as a shadow and a general rank much like Beru. However, Jinwoo noticed that the moment the queen became a shadow, his link to the other ants became incredibly weaker as a result. The Ant Queen seems much smaller than before, but Beru then explains to Jinwoo that the queen has absolute rule over other ants, and she was also never a fighter, so most of her magical ability was strictly for breeding. And now that she's a shadow, she can't do that anymore, so she's significantly weaker. So he then releases the queen. You can't have 2 leaders in one army, so sorry queenie, bye. His troops collecting the mana stones would be told that he doesn't want to take them, as those would go to the victims and the restoration of the island due to the dungeon break. So he keeps only 1 magical crystal, which was from Beru's body, and it looks black. The next few events play out a little differently in the anime as opposed to the manhwa. You see, the ants are now attacking the coastline in droves and Lee cowers in a room in fear as to what I highlighted earlier. But we then double back to Jinwoo and Beru now on top of the mountain surveying the battlefield when Beru lets him know that there are over 4,000 ants left. He then asks Beru to thin the crowd, in which case the Ant King gets to work. In the manhwa, he was still inside the nest when Beru lets him know that he can sense every single ant outside. This is another ability of his, and Jinwoo would ask him to take care of them, in which case we then get to see the mages on the ship firing at the swarm before we see the coastline and Lee cowering. But the scene would then continue to Mr. Sung and Ju-hee as well, not being able to hold back the ants and then bearing witness to a fast-moving projectile that kills all of them before whizzing away just as fast. In the anime, the situation was a bit more dire. In fact, they were all about to die before Beru killed those ants, saving them, and then we get the anime exclusive scene of Choi and the others trying to get through a swarm which kept pelting the helicopter until the mage loses his shield. This is where Jinwoo took the opportunity to save them again before we get the scene of our heroes cheering, completing the 4th Jeju raid. But we still have much more to discuss. Like the fact that the raid took a total of 3 days to complete, with day 1 and 2 being where most of the ants, if not all of them, were eliminated. The scene where we see China's national level hunter in action was actually day 2 of the raid, and he laments that he would have loved to face stronger ants. He is not to be messed with, as he's super powerful, as you can see. After that, in the manhwa, we get another scene that I'll blur out, because that would be a little bit of a spoiler. Hint though, Andre Thomas, one of the hunters that we saw from America, was also watching Jinwoo in action from his TV, and he's very interested in the hunter. This is when the manhwa treats us to a scene of Park and the other hunters as they survey the nest, killing any stragglers along, and we encounter 2 new entities along with Jinwoo's dad, which would go about the same way it did in the anime, and then off to Jinwoo paying his respects to the fallen. Now this video has gotten a little longer than I would normally put out, but there's so much to cover. I won't go into the nitty-gritty of certain details, as I believe that those would be too much of a spoiler. For the previous scenes which you saw me blaze over, there were some spoilers in that which I couldn't discuss the scene without talking about those spoilers, so I'll just leave it alone for now. For the rest of the scene, I'll just give you guys the cliff notes as to what happens from here, so bear with me as I wrap this all up. After paying his respects, he would speak to Chairman Go about what the next steps are for him. For the first time in the anime, this is when we get confirmation that he wants to establish his own. After leaving his meeting with President Go, he would then meet up with a person who wanted to talk to him from a few chapters ago. But that's another scene which I'll blur, because that's a whole different thing, and that's some spoilers, so yeah, moving right along. He gets stuck in traffic after that, and he gets a phone call where he sees that it is Jinho, which wasn't in the manhwa, and he now gets an update from Chairman Go that there's a dungeon and he's to clear it. In the manhwa, Jinwoo would have handed his phone to this little pipsqueak that looks a lot like Okarun for him to speak with President Go, and then Jinwoo enters the dungeon, in which case it changes to a red gate, and this is where he lets loose his shadows and gets to some work, and at that the anime would end. It's been an amazing season. I absolutely love it. Some episodes more than others, and some were really rough due to the production and stuff, and you know, the production wasn't the smoothest, but hey, they made it work with each episode being better than the last. The final episode was no different, though they skipped out a lot of content that gave us a lot of context. I would still give the season a solid 9.5. And maybe you're thinking, Kyle, that's way too high. Oh. But that's fine. With different mediums, we focus on different aspects, which, if you didn't check, the audience also actually likes. Let me know what you thought of this episode and the season overall, and what you're expecting for the next season. Leave a like, and if you haven't as yet, subscribe. Thank you again for joining me, V Nation. My name has been Kyle. Peace out and stay safe out there.